Hello and welcome back to THU TV. We are live from Malta with Why the Tribe. And on the show today with me, I have Brian Bradford and Daniele Volpe. And they both work at the Gnomon School. Daniele, you said you're a general manager of workshops, and Brian is a director of enrollment management. So, hi, welcome on the show.
Hello, hi.
Hello.
Hopefully there's people who are not tired of seeing me go live every 5 minutes and they're still watching us. And we can talk a little bit about, education and the importance of, finding out what you want to do and giving your career a focus. Who wants to start?
Either one of us.
Okay.
Let's chat. Let's talk.
Well, Daniele, if you want, you can speak Italian and I can translate if you're more comfortable.
It's okay.
So Brian, you work directly with students who are like prospective students, right? What do you feel like they're looking for when they come to the school?
Well, our school specifically, they're looking for training that's going to lead to a career, which is not typical with education in the United States and other places. I mean, typically, if you're going for like a degree program somewhere, you're looking for an education that will provide you with an experience. But most times the school's main priorities are not to prepare students directly for employment. Gnomon started as a vocational trade school in the late 90s, whose focus was always to simply take students, give them the most applicable skills needed to make themselves marketable right away, right? And so while we've grown over the last 20 years, have developed degree programs and other programs, and in some ways have become more traditionally academic, the focus has never been lost, and the focus has always been to make sure that students coming to Gnomon are essentially ready to be hired to their dream studio as soon as they're graduated. And we haven't lost sight of that, and we're very successful at it. Our last placement rate, job placement rate from the previous years, 100% for our 2-year full-time program. So all the efforts, at the school, from who we hire as instructors to the course curriculum and how it's designed, it's all designed for that one purpose, which is to make sure students can graduate, go work at their, Riot or Blizzard or DreamWorks or whatever, and represent the school on behalf of the industry.
Well, the thing is, a lot of time artists are not very social people. Like they tend to, work alone, and so how do you get the students to interact more with each other? Even you can tell me perhaps by running the workshops, you have direct experience of, watching them connect, or do you have certain exercises you make them do to make sure that they work as a team and they see the importance of, working together?
Not that much at the workshop. We have now like almost every month 2 to 3 live events at the Gnomon School. That is where the students, it's almost like a small THU, but we do this constantly every month. We invite like artists from any like studios, and that's where people come to connect, see how the pro artists, their workflow, and at the same time they connect. It's like networking is one of the most important things in this business.
And you find that students artists in general are starting to do that more now?
Yeah.
There's more opportunities for it. I mean, there wasn't a THU, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I think now more than ever there are opportunities for students or prospective students or even industry artists to get together and feel part of a community. And I think this is THU is an event that does that really well in a very unique way.
And do sometimes students ask you for advice on, if they're undecided? Because I've met a lot of artists here at THU who are really versatile and they're really good at this, but also at that, and they're kind of like, which one should I go for? How do you direct them?
Generally speaking, students always have this question early on. It isn't until they can really get their hands in it that they start to develop opinions and preferences about which part of a production pipeline that really appeals to them, which part that they really feel that they can get lost doing for long hours, which is a big important part. So yeah, I mean, the advice is generally, don't worry about it. You will be exposed to this in time. Keep an open mind. Oftentimes, the direction that people think they're going when they start ends up being something completely different once they've sat down in the software and they've had an instructor from a studio give them feedback, and they start to realize where they might, have talent in one particular area, or where they
I usually
just have
tell
an
them,
eye.
what do you enjoy more when you sit on the computer? What do you like
Yeah.
to? When you have fun? It's like, what is it like? Is it texturing, like painting? It's like, oh, it's like I like more texturing. That's follow that. You might like it for forever, or at some point you decide that it's the wrong one and you start to do something else. But you have to have fun. You have to enjoy when you spend hours in this business. Spend a lot of hours in the computers, and
Yeah, I can imagine.
if you don't like it, you're gonna hate your life.
The idea is the exposure usually clears that up for people.
Do you have a lot of programs designed for this kind of versatile like artists, like some programs that cover different things and then that help them then eventually find their path?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, when you go to university, the first year is usually quite generic, and then you start to specialize in your
Sure,
second,
it's the
third,
same
fourth year.
thing
You do.
at Nomen, yeah. So you could pick a generalist path and say, I want to be, versatile in every major area of a 3D production pipeline, for instance. And that sort of describes our BFA program. In our 2-year program, you get that foundation where you can develop some of the fundamentals of 3D in the first several terms before picking a focus. And that would allow you to then specialize in a particular area that really appeals to you. So you can choose both, or just completely just stay on the generalist path, because obviously there are a lot of jobs out there for artists who know the entire pipeline and can problem solve.
And I'm going to ask you something a bit tricky, because I mean, I've had people on these shows before, and I've spoken to a lot of people around, and it seems like they feel like the art education, which is evolving and has evolved a lot, hadn't quite prepared them for the real world out there. Like they gave them a lot of technical skills, but then these people lacked other things, because it's not just about literally the art, I'm guessing, right?
Right.
So do you feel like that's changing now? Do you feel like art schools have richer curriculums, and they prepare you also to go out there and get a job later? Or do you think it's important that they coexist with experiences like THU?
I mean, I guess it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
I mean, generally speaking, I guess I like to believe that schools are preparing students, maybe just being optimistic. I don't know if that's actually the case. The majority of art schools out there are sort of operating outside. I can only speak from the sort of industry perspective, and the majority of art schools out there are operating outside of that sort of industry bubble. So when it comes to Nomen, it's like I said earlier, every effort that we make is really designed to help prepare students for careers. That being said, I think you can't really understate the importance of events like this, where people come, get a different perspective, talk to different artists. I mean, just being in LA, we are in a production bubble, and there's obviously a lot of studios in LA. But even for us, it's really nice to come over here, come to Europe, get a deeper insight into the visual effects industry here in Europe, and talk to a lot of the lead artists and people over here, and kind of compare notes and see what's different, and so that perspective, even for us, people that have been in this industry for 10 plus years, it's hugely beneficial. I imagine it's the case for students.
And I mean, in fact, it's a different vibe here, I'm guessing, because it's easier in the States to go to events and meet, American artists, and then in Europe you have European artists, so you probably get to see a different approach to art, because it does change. In fact, it's curious. I mean, you're from Italy, Daniele, and you ended up working for Nomen, and I wonder how did that happen? What was your career path?
Oh, that was actually starting in Milan. Completely nothing to do with 3D. I was a network administrator for almost like 10 years. And then I decided to visit a friend of mine in California, and then I met Alex Alvarez. We had a friend in common. That time I was doing like web design as well. And from that, at some point, I decided to do the digital production program at school, and specialize in dynamics, VFX, fluid simulation. And when I finished the school, I had the option to decide, do I want to have a career into this industry or keep working at Nomon into the education? I really like the education part. So I decided to stick with Nomon, and it's been like 10 years now.
So I'm guessing that is also very helpful for prospective students and in general to connect with them because you have a background that's very
constantly.
different.
Like most of the students, like pretty much like almost all the students that finish the Nomon school, then they work in production. I keep always in contact with them because when they become like pro, they work like in some big production, I'm gonna call them back. Hey, let's make a tutorial about this specific topic. It's
and you bring them back for
it's
your
always,
workshop.
we are still there, like connection, networking.
So you're creating a community,
exactly.
Basically. You never let them go. Once you see that they're talented,
no.
it's like now you're with us forever.
I have to follow them, hundreds of artists. I have to be updated to see what they're doing, new techniques.
And is that hard to keep in touch? Because sometimes there's people who come here and they're like, oh, we meet once a year, but we're in touch the whole year round, you know, like. So is that hard for you to manage all these artists? Because there's plenty of students.
Can be, because most of the time they're in production working in a big movie. You know, a movie can take like years. And these are guys that work like 16, 18 hours a day. And, you know, it's not that easy that to find them free times to the tutorial with me. So for me, produce a tutorial can take even like 5 to 6 months. Not because like it's taking forever. It's they have to find the time for me to work on the tutorial.
But do you find that they're keen on collaborating? Like, do they feel like they're part of this community as well? Do they feel like giving back?
Absolutely.
Generally, yeah. I mean, from the perspective of students who come in 2 to 3 years, go through this very small sort of niche program, meet a lot of people with like-minded career goals and aspirations and interests. They form tight bonds there, and they develop a community of artists, both in the instructors and the staff and the fellow students and alumni. And by the time it's over, they get a job, and it's very community driven. And a lot of the things that we do, like Danny mentioned, the events are all based on that idea of giving back to the community.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who feel like they're more free to express themselves when they're freelance. Do you in general recommend going freelance rather than working in an industry, or do you think that's a personal choice? Do you have an opinion on that, a take on that?
It's a personal choice. Sometimes it's good to stay a little bit out from the studio. You can manage your time easily, but sometimes it happens that when you're freelance, you work way more than you're in production.
Because you don't know how much money you're going to make in a month.
Exactly. So it can be a good thing. It's like mostly personal choice, but
everybody I know who's done freelance has kind of gone back and forth. So I agree with Danny's answer. I mean, it is a personal choice, I think, for people based on where they are. Some people get burnt out on the studio scene and want the freedom to be at home. But then, of course, people get lonely and kind of stir crazy when they're home too long and like the structure of a studio environment. So I recommend that people approach the industry being open-minded to both options. And maybe try both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a profession where you can easily go from one to the other, right?
But
so I mean,
it's very important to working with the group, with other people. I think is the best thing because you keep learning from others. Being alone is kind of that's why I think you can do it for a short time, but go back in a team. I think is really good.
Yeah. Like these teams that you're talking about, I mean, they're made up of people who do very different jobs sometimes, like amongst each other. Like you will have the artists and the more creative people, the more technical people, you have programmers, you have like all sorts of people. And right now you guys are both in management, I don't know, you probably know this already. I mean, we've introduced business at THU as well. So we're trying to give people some basic management skills as well. Not necessarily because they have to become managers, but also just to understand what it is you guys do, so that then they can, also be more understanding of each other. Do you feel like that's a good idea? It's something that could work?
Yeah, you can answer because we have class about that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a business of production classes and things that are designed to educate people on oftentimes what they don't want to be concerned with. And this was something that Scott Ross had said in the opening ceremony, describing some of the business classes, or lectures rather. And it was just, yeah, I mean, artists tend to pursue, creative industries and oftentimes are not as interested in the numbers or the, sort of paperwork, legality side of things. But I think having a sort of rudimentary understanding of how best to protect yourself and navigate the industry.
And how to pay taxes.
Navigate your taxes.
That's important.
Et cetera. It's funny. I hear a lot of stories from people who are in the industry that are really ignorant of things like that, right? They're ignorant of just general what they should be claiming on their taxes and how to get paid properly. And there's a lot of surprises, I think, that they encounter that could be avoided. Yeah. You know what I mean?
You're being molested
There's
by Maltese fly.
Yes.
Keep it there. Don't send it to me.
I don't know how I got in because that's actually closed, so I'm not sure how I got in. But technology and softwares, and like I've had people on this show telling me about like new things they're developing. It keeps evolving and it goes really fast. The industry is growing really fast as well. Do you feel like the schools, art schools, prepare students well enough for this fast-growing industry?
Definitely
like,
not.
Do they? I was hoping for.
Don't ask me to name them, but
yes.
No. As a whole, no.
Yeah.
As a whole, no. And I know that because just of what we see at the school. I mean, I think there are some good schools, obviously, and there are good programs at good schools. But we get a lot of students at Gnomon interested in a 2-year program who already have degrees from reputable art schools in that same field, and oftentimes they feel, that they may have nice things to say about their school, but it didn't necessarily prepare them to get a job directly out of school, and so they use Gnomon as sort of a finishing school.
That's to polish off, you mean?
Yeah, and that's been happening at the same rates from today as it was 10, 12 years ago when I started doing this. So I think schools are making an effort, and I think it's more common that you have good people at these schools trying to bring in as much industry influence as possible to help prepare students. But still, we're sort of, at least in the States, the schools are trying to catch up to a lot of what's happening with technology in the entertainment industry.
Do you often adapt, like, I don't know, change the things in your school around and try to be up to date?
Constantly. It's just constantly moving thing.
And we just opened this year, like, VR lab with how many stations?
Yeah, well, with VR lab and
I was at the tech talk last night, the Quill one, and like, I was just watching that thing going, wow, how is he painting with those glasses on, and like he's doing stuff and he's painting, like it's incredible, and it takes a whole new skill set.
In 10 years what they'll be able to do.
Yeah, and I imagine these people like in this office just sitting there with their glasses on, drawing and painting in a parallel world. That's kind of scary as well for me. I mean, it's something to be careful with. But you, like, in the workshops and stuff, how often, like, on a daily basis do you apply creativity in your workshops? Like, how creative do you have to get to make them constantly appealing and, interesting for these people who go around and see stuff like Quill happening, and it's like, how do we keep them?
To talk directly with the artists, we have to come out with something that appeals our users. So we have to come up with for a beautiful final render image. And then like the making of it, how that artist, and I very often ask them, I want to know your workflow. I don't need someone that read the manual, go step by step. I need to know which workflow you use in the studio, and let's record the workflow.
And so you work closely and directly with the artists who are doing the workshops.
Correctly.
So yours is also a very creative job.
Oh, yeah.
Like we used to call THU an event for artists, then we were like, no, it's actually for creatives because we wanted to expand our tribe, and now it's like for creators. That's like the new addition, because the idea is that anyone who creates anything they create, they need to apply creativity to it.
Exactly.
And that's not something you necessarily learn in a school, but in a school you can learn how to control it, perhaps. No, maybe. What do you think?
Control
your creativity, like to not really control, but like put it in the right direction.
Yeah, I think the curriculum is designed to do that. I think oftentimes in production you're working on other people's ideas, and so you are a part of that. And so there's depending on which part of the pipeline you're working, there's some would argue, a limited amount of creativity that you can apply in some positions versus others, right? And I think figuring that out and is part of finding your path, right? Like, do I like to do something more technical where maybe it's less creative, but maybe it feeds me? Or do I like a position that is much more creative and there's a lot more of me within the work that I'm presenting to a director for approval?
Yeah, me, like, not being an artist, sometimes I feel like working closely with people who are creating stuff is still inspiring, like, you know, in a passive way for me. So that helps.
One of the tutorials a couple of years ago was with Sid Mead, and spent 1 week in his house doing the tutorial, and was so inspiring because while he was drawing, it was telling me all this amazing story about the first throne and all this movie, and I was like kind of shaking while recording the tutorial. So it is a very
it's nice
creative.
and it's very stimulating, and you guys are like preparing and you know, growing the next generation of artists for this world. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
And thank you for being on the show with us
Thank you
today.
for having a THU. I love it.
Malta is beautiful.
It is, right? Even with this stormy thing, it's
it's
very
amazing.
romantic.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, then for those of you who didn't make it, we hope you can make it next year. And see you later with THU TV Live.